One of these days, everyone is going to retire. Obviously, the exception is if you die in your sleep, or one day you're young, you die before you even retire. But eventually, everybody gets old and they retire. If death does not precede your retirement, you will retire. So, what are the things we should do before we retire? That's what we're going to talk about today. Things to do, actually 16 things to do when you retire. Or, I should say, before you retire. That's what we'll talk about. Stay with me. Hang loose. There are about 16 things that you should do before you retire. If you think of anything else, I'll appreciate it if you can add it in the comment section for everyone's benefit. But I was sitting here thinking, what did I have to do before I retired? And I did this maybe about 3 years before retirement. If you can plan, you should plan. And these are some of the things that I did. Let's go through it. Number 1, review your current and future expenses, because you'll be changing from getting variable income to a fixed income. Fixed income means you will receive a certain amount from your pension, benefits, or regular withdrawals. So you will learn, or you will have to learn, how to live within that fixed income. Now, some people, it's not a problem because they're getting a whole lot. Sometimes they even get more when they retire than before they retired. But that is not, there's not too many people who are in that boat. Okay, but most people, once they stop working, the regular paycheck stops, and now they're locked into a specific fixed income every month. So you will have to review what has been your expenses in the past, which expenses are going to disappear, which expenses are going to be added, and you come up with a new budget. Number 2, review and pay off credit cards or debt balances. Almost everybody has a mortgage. Some of you already paid off your mortgage, which is good for you. Some people refinance their house and have a home equity loan instead. And you have to review all those. Credit cards, some people make monthly payments on their credit card. In my case, I usually use only one card with 2 additional cards as a backup, but I use one as a primary. And I almost don't use cash. I charge everything through the credit card. Once in a while, I experimented with the debit card, but I don't want to use debit cards. So at the end of each month, I pay off the entire balance on my credit card. Hopefully, you're doing the same thing. But for some people, they make monthly installments or monthly payments, and you will have to settle all those accounts because you will be on a fixed income now. So you have to be very careful. The third one is review all the properties that you own. You have a home. How are you going to dispose of it? Or are you going to continue owning it? It really depends on what you're going to do at retirement. And you have other properties like cars. Maybe you have 2 cars. You don't need 2 cars anymore. So maybe you have to get rid of one. Maybe you have a vacation home. Maybe you have a boat. You'll have to decide what you're going to do with all those things. Review your insurance needs moving forward, because you have a different need while you're young compared to when you get older. For example, medical insurance. Before, we used to just ignore that, and we don't use it as much. But as we get older, very seldom will you not have any medical condition. You will have some medical condition of some kind. Some exceptional people are very healthy and they don't need any doctors. They don't need any medical coverage. Life insurance. Well, for most people, life insurance will no longer be required, hopefully, because your kids are grown up. You just need to make sure that you have some money for your funeral. Otherwise, in all likelihood, you will not need life insurance anymore. Professional liability insurance. Maybe when you were working, you were an accountant, you were a doctor, you were an engineer. Maybe you used to have liability insurance, professional liability insurance, and now you don't need it anymore, so get rid of it. Medical facility, the availability of medical facility, because as I said, as you get older, you will have medical conditions. If you're healthy, you can live gazillion miles away, you don't care. But if you're sickly, you may need to be more accessible to a medical facility. Decide where you are going to live and budget accordingly for it. So when you're reviewing the so-called current and future expenses, you can do that after you have really decided what you're going to do, or maybe you should do it concurrently. Review all investments and how you will manage them elsewhere. If you're not going to move, you're going to stay put, well, in all likelihood, it's just going to be a continuation of the same thing. But if you're moving elsewhere, especially if you're going to move overseas, what are you going to do with these investments and how are you going to manage them? You need to plan for that. Number 8, how are you going to do your banking activity? It used to be you can just go to the bank, or maybe like me, it has been a while since I saw my bank because I don't go to the bank. I do everything online and I talk to them when I need to talk to them. But most of the time it's online transaction for me. But for some people, they want to go to the bank, and therefore when they move elsewhere, whether it is overseas or domestically, you need to make sure that it is going to be accessible to you. How do you handle communication? That's extremely important. For example, me, I have 2 children. Okay, one in Washington State and another one in the East Coast in Connecticut. So how do I communicate with them? We almost talk regularly with them, daily, weekly. So that need to continue, because to me that's very important, and I'm sure and I hope that will be important to you as well. One way of communicating is through cell phone while we're here. Of course, here that's all we use. Cell phone, cell phone, cell phone. Sometimes we do texting. But most of the time it is via cell phone. Now, especially when you're overseas, you may want to consider Viber, Messenger, WhatsApp. By the way, I communicate with my grandchildren in Washington using Messenger, using the video phone instead of just regular phone. I have used Viber, Messenger, not much WhatsApp, when I communicate in the Philippines. I'm talking about in calling relatives in the Philippines, or when they call me, we always use Messenger or Viber. When I talk to my real estate agent, I usually call by Viber. Now, here's the problem with Viber, Messenger, and WhatsApp. For you to communicate with someone, that someone also has to have their own app, a Viber app, Messenger app, or WhatsApp app. Okay, they have to have an app. But what if you're in the Philippines and you need to call your bank, or you need to call your insurance company, or you need to call your software vendor, Microsoft, for example? What are you going to do? They don't have Viber, they don't have Messenger, they don't have WhatsApp. That is when Magic Jack is important. And Magic Jack, if I'm in the Philippines, I can call a regular US number like I'm calling as if I'm in the US, and it will be able to go through. It's a paid service. I can't remember how much it is. I think it's like $40 per year. Between $40 and $50 per year. Not much. But in the event I need to call my bank, or I need to call somebody, or I can also use that to call my children using their landline or their cell phone. I can call them there as if I'm in the United States. That's the beauty of Magic Jack. Here's a downfall. You have to have internet access, because the telephone is not running through telephone lines or cable. Instead, it's going through the internet. So you have to have an internet service. Which brings us to number 10. What cable or internet service are you going to use when you're overseas? When you're here, you'll probably just use the whatever is available locally. Could be Comcast, could be Sprint, could be anything. In the Philippines, I don't know if I'm going to subscribe to cable, but I'll probably try it for a month or 2 and see if I'm going to be able to really use it. But what's very important is the internet service. I use the internet service to, for example, view YouTube. That's where I get my news, because I got tired of cable here in the United States. It's mostly fake news anyway. CNN, which used to be my favorite cable channel, and I don't watch CNN anymore because everything is political. I'm not going to say the word. So I got sick and tired of it. That's why I discontinued my cable in the United States. In the Philippines, I don't know. Maybe it's going to be useful. So you'll have to think about that. The internet service is very important now, more important than cable, really, because what you need to hear in cable, you can also get on the internet. You can watch movies on the internet. The other important thing is VPN, which is Virtual Private Network. And let me explain to you, for those people who don't know what VPN is. If you're conducting your banking activity and you're calling, for example, your bank, or if you're calling your investment company, let's say you want to sell your stock or you want to buy stock, they will find out, or they will know if you're calling overseas. This is through your IP address, they can detect that. And once they see that you are calling from overseas, you will not be able to do a transaction. So now I haven't tested it yet, but they told me that's going to happen. So I have a VPN being provided to me right now for free by my it's a virus protection software called Kaspersky, and they provide me with a free VPN service, but that is limited. I'm limited to so many bandwidth. Once I move to the Philippines, I will subscribe, and I think it costs about $40 a year. Not much. And what it's going to do is, when you make when you have a communication, internet, online work, the other party is not going to know that you're overseas. They will think you're in the United States, somewhere in the United States, maybe state of Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York. But that is the beauty of VPN, Virtual Private Network. You have to look into that. Number 11, examine potential future activities. For example, what are you going to do when you retire? What are you going to do in the Philippines? In my case, I'll be doing YouTube, in which case I will need a cable. I mean, an internet service, okay? Now, if I'm going to be doing gardening, then that will affect where I'm going to live, because obviously I cannot do gardening at the condominium. So I'll have to buy myself a land and house and lot in the Philippines so I can do some gardening work. So you have to look at your examine what your needs are going to be, or what your plans are going to be. Housing needs, as we were talking, are you going to buy a house and lot? Are you going to buy a condominium, or are you just going to rent? Or are you going to rent for a few years with a plan to buy a house and lot or condominium, depending on what your plans are? And depending on what kind of lifestyle you're going to have and where you're going to live, you may need number 13, which is transportation needs. If you will just stay in Manila, it's very convenient. Transportation is very convenient. Of course, we're not planning to use a jeepney as a matter of practice, but we could use it. We could ride a tricycle if I need to. But most likely we will need a car, because I intend to travel in the nearby islands in Manila, like in Luzon. Domestic licenses required. Well, number 1 is, of course, your driver's license. You may not want to have a car, but you may want a driver's license for purposes of being able to drive when you need to, and for purposes of identification. And now, number 15, immigration and activities you will get involved into. If you're in the United States, you don't have to worry about this. But if you're going overseas, whether it's Mexico, Italy, Philippines, wherever, you will need to consider, what are the immigration requirements? Am I going to be an immigrant? Am I going to be a dual citizen? Should I just go as a balikbayan and keep on renewing it? Will I be staying in the Philippines continuously for several years? And should I get a retirement visa? For example, even if you're a Filipino citizen, if you don't want balikbayan, which is only good for 1 year, and you don't want to be a dual citizen, you can get a retirement visa. The problem is you will have to invest some money in a retirement visa. And lastly, how are you going to move? And how are you going to ship your items? In my case, I'll move maybe about 10 boxes of balikbayan, 5 to 10 boxes of balikbayan, and dispose of everything. Why? It is troublesome to be getting a container and shipping it. Then you have to deal with customs, and it's expensive too. And for some people, it makes sense to do that because their valuables are irreplaceable. They have either a sentimental value, sometimes maybe they don't want spending the money or the headache, a lot of aspirin and Tylenol dealing with customs in the Philippines. And sometimes some people had good experience, and they heard it in YouTube also that they had good experience. So each one is different. So you will have to decide on your own what you're going to do. So these are the 16 things I can think of what you need to go through, and I have already been through all of them. So the only thing I haven't been through yet is the car situation. What will I do? In fact, I'm thinking as far as the car is concerned, maybe I'll buy a jeepney owner. So I don't know. I could buy a used car. I could buy a more expensive car. I'd like to have a four-wheel drive because if I'll be traveling around, especially in remote areas, I want to have safety access to those areas. And sometimes a four-wheel drive will be very helpful. But I don't know. I haven't decided yet. So that's what I can say right now. And again, if you have any additional things that you need to think of, maybe I missed it, please add them in the comment section. And I'll tell you what, I will appreciate it if you can click like if you like this video. And I'll appreciate it if you can share this with your friends who are in the process of retiring. And hopefully it would help them too. Okay? So that's it for now. Make it a great day, and God bless.